Welcome back, action takers. Today we're joined by the one, the only Jeff Goins. Jeff is awesome. Spoiler alert, you're really going to enjoy this episode. And Jeff has just really a lot of great insights on better writing. He's the author of 3 best-selling books. His business, he's been able to help tens of thousands of students write better and get their own writing out there. He's made millions of dollars. That's a lot of zeros out there, but it didn't just start overnight. He had to hustle. He had to work for it. And he tells some really great stories in this episode. And, you know, I think it's really important as creators that we're always looking for ways to monetize. And as Jeff says, I don't like to call it monetization. I like to call it find something to sell. So as creators, we want to find something to sell. It's super important. And in this episode, we're really going to break that down. We're going to talk about how to share in helpful ways. We're going to talk about the importance of making a bold statement, AKA don't be boring. And he's going to explain how, if he was starting over today, how he would get his writing career off and running. Super interesting. And oh, side note, by the way, if you're not already in some sort of membership program, I'd really encourage you. If you're into podcasting, if you want to learn more about podcasting, if you want some support, click below. There's a link. You're specially invited to join the Podcast Savant Mastermind program. It is awesome. It starts at $25 a month. It is very valuable. And I'm just going to try to help you learn things that I wish I would have known years ago when I started my podcasting journey. And we talk about this as well during this episode with Jeff. You have to have a place where you can unfold large ideas. You can't get it through in 15-second clips. But you know what? Let me let Jeff explain this to you because he's going to do it a lot better than I can. And hopefully I'll see you in the Podcast Savant Mastermind. There's a lot of benefits. Click below, check it out, and I'll see you in there. All right, action takers, let's go. Let's get into the episode. Yo, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Good to be here.
Yeah, Jeff, my pleasure. Hey, listen, Jeff, I'm just going to jump right into it, brother. You're a writer. You're a best-selling author, blogger. Why should I care? In a world that's dominated by 15-second TikTok videos, why should I care about writing?
You shouldn't care unless you do, you know? I think that writing is an opportunity to slow down. And, you know, we all understand the amount of noise that's coming our way these days. And if that's your jam, go for it. My friend was staying here from out of town, and he was telling me about I don't know, he was telling me about something that his teenage child is into, where they're called, like, I can't remember, like burning memes or something, where it's like these, he goes, you know how when we were growing up, and he's in his 40s, I'm 39. He goes, you know, we communicated in movie quotes. And I was like, yeah, totally. Like Dumb and Dumber or Fight Club or whatever. Like you would just kind of share movie lines. It was how you connected with your friends. And he says, well, my kid communicates with their friends through memes. And they flashed him some meme, and it was just some random weird thing. And he didn't understand it. And they were just dying, they're just laughing. So, I don't really, maybe I'm getting old. I don't really believe that it's my job to talk somebody into caring about something. I don't actually think that works very often. What I would say about writing is that if you are overwhelmed by the pace of the world today, where everything's faster, funnier, bigger, tighter, more compressed, right? That all that hype, it's not bad, it's just a thing that's happening, but all that hype always gives way to something else, right? We're always kind of going from, one extreme to the other, and that's how humanity evolves. So it's no surprise that as technology gets faster and as communication gets tighter, sort of, right? You went from like the podcast to 3-minute YouTube videos to now 15-second TikTok clips and reels and all these things. Very quick, very punchy. You're seeing that there's a resurgence of long form writing now, right? You're seeing that with lots of like Substack newsletter. You're seeing that if you're going to write something, I mean, when I started blogging 15 years ago or whatever, it was like a 250 to 300 word blog post won the day. That it was about frequency. And then Twitter kind of came on the scene, and it was about, Twitter originally, Twitter and Tumblr were like these micro blogging sites. That was kind of what they were touted as, right? And then like frequency wasn't enough. Like if you're going to write something and put it on the internet or put it in an article in a, print piece of media or in a book or something, make it worth our time, right? If it can be a 15-second video, if it can be a meme, then make that. But if you have something to say and it takes some time to think about it, and it's going to take some editing to get it right, there are some things worth saying that take that amount of thinking, that amount of preparation, intentionality, and work. And those things are worth paying attention to. Those things are worth our time. So don't care about writing should you care about, I don't know. Like if what you're doing is working for you, but I would guess that as the world gets faster and faster, our appetites for slower, deeper, better, there will be an appetite for that. It doesn't mean that everybody will want that, but there are some people who are already getting exhausted from trying to keep up with the incredible pace of things. You ever look on your phone and you're scrolling through Instagram or something, and Instagram refreshes while you're doing that? This happens to me. Or maybe I'll pull up Instagram and I start reading something, but it hasn't refreshed the feed, and it'll immediately drop that. I'm like, where's that thing? I was trying to read that thing, and it's gone. It's gone. Writing stays. Good writing stays. To publish oneself, even just on the internet, is a way of saying this matters, and this thing that matters, at least to me, is going to stay for a while.
I think it's a really good answer, because there's definitely,
I agree. It's a great answer.
It's a five stars checklist. And, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about podcasting, is because you kind of get to slow down. It's not that, that rapid, what's next, swipe left type of mentality. And you did give a really good, I think, brief history of how writing has evolved over the last decade. But I'm kind of curious, Jeff, going back in your history, and I mean, you've worked with tens of thousands, millions of dollars in revenue. What was that moment where you recognized that writing could be that thing for you? It wasn't just going to be something you did in 8th grade for a paper, but you realized that you could actually make a living writing, because it's not easy. What was that moment where you realized you could make it happen?
I mean, that moment keeps repeating itself throughout my life. I don't think there are moments of epiphany. There are reminders of what you already know. And what we call an epiphany is actually that you go, yeah, I know that. That's been sitting in my gut for a while, and I've been avoiding it. Writing was this vocation that I avoided for most of my life. Liz Gilbert calls writing her home, not in the sense that it's where she came from, but it's the place that she always returns to. And I always thought that was a beautiful definition of home and of one's vocation. It is the thing that you keep coming back to. So when I was a senior in high school, I wrote an English paper. It was a book report, and I didn't read the book, and I got an A- on the book report. It was our final. That one paper was worth about 20% of our grade, if I'm remembering correctly. This was a hard teacher. She rarely gave A, and this was a class that I needed to graduate. And I was a good student, but I didn't read the book. I kind of thumbed through it the night before, and I stayed up all night writing this 20-page paper. It was one of those it's your big senior year paper kind of thing. It's preparing you for college. And I wrote this beautiful paper, and I got the paper back, and it was full of red marks. And I was thumbing through, nervously getting to the last page, and it had a lot of red marks on it. She was not an easy teacher. And it said, 92% A-. You should seriously consider becoming a professional writer or a journalist when you grow up. When I don't think she said when you grow up, because I was 18-year-old young man, but she said you should seriously become a professional writer or a journalist. Next time, read the book. So that wasn't a moment for me. I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to go graduate and have fun and go on my senior trip. And then a year or two later, when I was in college and I was getting ready to declare a major, I opened my glove box of my car and that paper was in there. And I pulled it out and I read it and I cried a little bit, I think. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is this thing that is easier for me than it is for most people. It's not hard. It's very easy for me. There are hard parts about it, but what is difficult for many people is not difficult for me. And it's always been that way. And I didn't study English in college. I got a double major in Spanish and religion because I was at a liberal arts school, and they just let you study whatever you want with no thought about how you're ever going to get a job. And yeah, and then I traveled with a band. It's like I'm stacking all of these great vocational experiences. Spanish, I went to Spain for a semester, and religion because it sounds interesting to me. And then I'm like, I'm going to go tour with a band after I graduate. My professors, I was a good student. My professors were like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just following my bliss. I'm doing what seems fun to me. And that was my dream, was to play professional music. And I did it for a year and I didn't love it. And my favorite part that year was writing our weekly blog updates. This was in 2006, and we would write updates from our band back to our friends, family, what little fans we had. And I loved that. It was, and actually at the end of the year, people who had read the blog said, when are you going to write a book? And I was like, oh, no. And then I moved to Tennessee. I started working at a call center. Then I go work for a nonprofit. I learn about marketing. And then I start working for this nonprofit, and I started teaching people how to blog. I mean, that was one of my job. That was my job. And again, I was writing, it just kind of kept coming back. So there wasn't a moment. It was just this thing that kept knocking on my door. And then when I was about 27 years old, I just really felt like I want to do this. And I was writing, but I wasn't like, I want to be a professional writer. And I lived in Nashville, and I saw people doing this. I saw people start blogs, build online audiences, get traditionally published, and become an author. It was a trajectory that I saw, and I was around it, And so I kind of understood the path to do that. And I did it. I started mimicking what I was seeing. And there was a moment where I was just kind of sitting with this desire to do it. I was kind of blogging on the side, but I was just kind of trying it out. I hadn't like fully immersed myself in. I was just kind of dipping my toe. I hadn't fully committed, like when you're ever pursuing a dream, but you're not all in on it. You're like, like maybe this will work out over here. And I had a conversation with a friend, and he asked me point blank, he said, what's your dream? And I said, I don't know. I don't really have one of those. I'm married. We're going to start a family. Like, I'm a grown up. I don't need a dream. All of my friends who had dreams were working at coffee shops. I didn't want their life. I didn't believe in dreams at that point. And my friend was like, really? Because I would have thought your dream was to be a writer. And I said, well, I don't know. I said, yeah, I guess, yes, I would like to be a writer someday, but that'll probably never happen. And he just looked at me because I was writing. I was like doing stuff. I just wasn't committed to it. He said, Jeff, you are a writer. You just need to write. And if there is a moment, it was that moment where the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were, which is to say there were all these moments that stacked on each other. And then there's this final moment where I was like, fine, I'll do it. And after that day, I started calling myself a writer, and I really started taking myself seriously. And I started introducing myself as a writer, and putting myself out there like that forced me to bring a level of seriousness and commitment and even passion that I wasn't bringing to the table before. And I think you've got to be careful with this sort of stuff, because I don't believe you fake it till you make it. But I do believe you can believe it till you become it. And what I was doing is I was putting myself out there saying, I am a writer and I want to be a professional writer. And I wasn't lying. I was just going, yes, I am a writer. I'm going to lead with that. And then the next thing that people ask is like, what are you doing? What are you writing? Oh, well, I better be writing if I'm going to say that. And it forced a level of seriousness that I wouldn't have found otherwise. And I started acting like a professional before I ever became one.
Great answer. Lots of stories too, which is something that I've put a huge emphasis on in my later years, is trying to implement stories. But I want to kind of build off that, Jeff. You decided, I am a writer. This is how I'm going to market myself, let's say. This is how I'm going to position myself when meeting new people. How did you actually build that into a business then? And how do you think it's changed over the past decade? If you were to start fresh today and say that you were a writer, what would that look like today? Would it still be book writing and blogging, or would it be something different? So 2 questions in one. What did it look like for you then? And what would it look like for you now to start that writing?
I started practicing in public. I started writing a new blog post and publishing it every single day. And I did that for 2 years. And then I started getting in front of other people's audiences, because you have to have an audience, and you either buy one or earn one, or someone gives one to you. And I found that the cheapest way to grow an audience quickly was to show up in front of other people's audiences. And I did that through guest posting on other people's blogs. That was a very scalable way to grow an audience quickly. It took me 6 months to grow my email list to about 72 people. And then in a week, when I started giving something away on my blog, I started giving away a free ebook and asking other people to promote it. I went from 70 something to over 1,000 people in a week. And then in the next 6 months, I went from 1,000 email subscribers to about 10,000 by guest posting on other people's websites. And then the next year I went from about 10 to maybe 50,000, just replicating that process. And then, once you have an audience, once you have what Kevin Kelly calls 1,000 true fans, it's just really a matter of finding out what people want and giving it to them in a way that feels valuable to them. So I did a survey. I asked my audience, what would you be willing to pay for? And they told me ebooks talking about how you've done what you did. And so I wrote a few short ebooks that in a weekend made me the equivalent of a paycheck. And I was like, oh, well, this is a real thing. And then I published, I actually took those ebooks down. I made a few $1,000s off of them. I self-published a book on Amazon. I started making several $1,000s a month doing that. This is 2012 now. And by the end of the year, I was getting ready to launch my first online course, basically teaching writers how to build an audience the way that I had done it. And that's how I did it, and I went from, so books and online course was how I grew basically about $1 million business when it was in its heyday. I don't do that anymore. I don't teach online courses anymore. I write books and help other people with their books. But yeah, that's how I did it. And so I was always writing stuff, publishing my own stuff, and then telling people what I was learning through the process of doing something that was, quite difficult for other people, building an audience, getting published, making money. And now I think all of those principles apply. You need an audience. You've got to get in front of other people's channels. You've got to find out what that audience wants and then sell that to them. And how you do those things, the tactics change. The principles don't change. The strategies and tactics tend to evolve. So if I were to start over today, I am sort of starting over. I have a new business. The things that I did before don't work the same way they do now. And, I have people who already know, like, and trust me. So that in some ways is easier. But I would start a podcast. I would find some mode of expression that would allow me to connect with an audience. I think the easiest way to do that right now is a podcast. I would have a podcast and a newsletter. And even if you don't think you're a particularly well-spoken writer, you could literally just write like an essay, write something out and read it. I think that's a really cool art form. A podcast doesn't have to be an interview. It doesn't have to be a conversation. It's just audio. And that's a way that people are accustomed to connecting with other people. And then I would do what I'm doing right here, which is go on other people's podcasts, tell them about my podcast, and get a link back to the website or the show so that people could, if they liked what I was saying, they could find me, and I would build the audience. I would find out what they want, and I would sell it to them. And in terms of whether or not you write books or not, that's up to you, right? Books matter. They matter now more than they ever have, I believe. There are 10 times as many books being published now as there were 10 years ago. It's a very crowded space, but I don't think, but that also means books aren't going away. But that really comes down to how you want to say what you want to say. You certainly don't need to write a book and shouldn't write a book unless there is a message inside of you that is worthy of a book.
So I want to go into the podcasting just a little bit deeper, Jeff, because I'm a podcaster. I run a podcast agency. I have a podcast mastermind, also of which in my podcast mastermind, there's several writers. So I know they're excited to hear from you, Jeff. Hey Creator is the name of your podcast. And
yes.
I'm just kind of curious, when you started Hey Creator, how has it evolved since your first episode to your latest? As far as your expectations, your goals, your why, how has Hey Creator podcast evolved over the years?
It's a new podcast. I started it last year. I'd been running a podcast called The Portfolio Life for about 6 years. The first podcast I ever started, I started because you were supposed to have a podcast, and I never knew what I wanted it to be. I didn't feel like I had permission to make it into what it needed to be. I didn't like it. I didn't respect it. Now, I've come to hear lots of people liked that show and listened to it, and it did okay. But I didn't. I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. And so I stopped that about 2 years ago when I was kind of going through my own sort of personal reinvention, rediscovery of myself and what I wanted to do for this next season of life. Because I've been writing online and publishing and running an online business for over 10 years now. And I was sort of tired of how I'd been doing it, and it was certain things that used to be easy were harder, and certain things that I loved, I no longer liked. And so I stopped doing that. And I wanted to write a newsletter that I believed in. I wanted to say something to the creative class. I didn't want to just talk to writers. I wanted to talk to creators, to people making things, because I've never really thought of myself just as a writer. I've always thought of myself as an artist, a musician. I always loved visual art. I was never great at it. I always wrote poetry. Becoming an author was probably the last thing I expected. But I always wanted to, write books too. So I started it just because I wanted to say something. And I actually thought of it early on as an audio newsletter. And so we call every episode an issue. We call the seasons are like volumes, and that's why it's called Hey Creator. It's like, hey creator, here's what's going on. But it is what I think every platform ought to be for a creative professional, which is not the place where you build your audience. It is not the place where a platform is not where you build your audience. That is false. That is not how great artists become who they are. It is a place where people catch you practicing in public. And as a result, they stick around. Now that may sound, semantic to some people, but I think it matters to me. Think about how a comedian hones his craft. What he does is he shows up unannounced at comedy clubs. He is either nobody, so it doesn't matter that he's announced, or he or she is somebody, and they show up last minute to try out some new jokes. And they know until they've refined their set and they go on tour that this is all practice. They are practicing in front of other people, overhearing themselves say things that they didn't know they believed, that they didn't know they knew. David White calls poetry the art of sort of eavesdropping on yourself, overhearing yourself say things that you didn't know that you knew. And I love that idea that art is a way of saying something that you go, that's what I think about that? That's amazing. I actually think podcasting lends itself well to that sort of self-discovery that you go, oh, wow, I didn't know that. So the podcast for me is a place to create. It's a place to make something. And it's kind of fun. I have a great relationship with our producer, Kelton, who, I just talk. And then about halfway through me talking, we both go, oh, that's the idea. That's the thing that we want to say. Right. And then we kind of build it around that. So it's just that. It's a fun project. It's a place to play. It is, we call it a mixtape for the creative class. It's like these aren't new ideas. These are just ideas that work that we've remixed into a format that is hopefully fun and interesting for people. And it's an opportunity for me to experiment with the next thing that I want to say. And this is a thing that I wish we were a little bit more forgiving about towards each other in regards to the internet. Because these publishing tools are so easy, podcasting, social media, blogging, newsletters. It's so easy to put something out in front of a lot of people right now. Like anybody who experienced the internet during the age of dial-up or before there even was an internet doesn't understand how special that is. That you used to have to hard code HTML text. You had to like, you couldn't just write and publish. You had to code it into a website, into a web page, and upload that to a server in order for people to even see a thing that you wanted to say. And like 4 people would look at it, right? So the fact that pretty much anybody on the internet right now can put something on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and like probably a few hundred people will see it in a few days. That's tremendous. That's incredible. Everybody has their own little like church now, you know? I grew up in a small town of 1,100 people, and like half the town would go to church, right? Like everybody has a church now. Everybody has, you know, a group of people that knock on their door every morning and go, hey, what do you want to say? And you get to say something. You get to step on the pulpit and preach. And I wish that we would understand that we are all just figuring it out as we go. And we're seeing what works. We don't know. We're seeing what we believe and what we think. And that if we could have that same playful energy with our own creative work and be forgiving towards other people who are just working it out in front of other people, maybe, you know, we'd all be a little bit better off. We wouldn't be, you know, tearing each other at the throat for saying something stupid and you know, people not liking it, because that happens. People say dumb things. I say dumb things.
Yeah, a little grace goes a long way. And so one of the points you brought up there, Jeff, is working things out. And I also noticed, and this was something I saw on your website, goinswriter.com, is that you made this point, stop being boring. Stop being boring. And I think one of the ways that we try to stop being boring is by taking like a really hard stance on a particular topic, which, you know, I think can be dangerous. I think it's important that we keep open minds and work this out, which is one of the reasons why I love having all these different perspectives, business owners, writers. I have a host show called The Awesome Dad Show, you know, and it's just nice to hear different ideas from different people. And because to your point, ideas change, they evolve.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's okay to have a position, to take a side. I think it's actually better. Let's make sure I believe this as I say it.
We're working it out. We're working it out.
You don't want to be what Seth Godin calls a wandering generality, where you wander through life never saying anything. I think one should discipline oneself in the art of conviction and be willing to say something hard that you believe is true and stay with it until it's proven wrong, at which point you are willing to say, I was wrong. Now, this is hard because if you get 50% of this formula, you're a tyrant, right? Like if you get either half of it, you're nobody. You're a tyrant, or you're like or you're a sheep, you know, right? Like, but there is something powerful and transformative for yourself and those around you to say, I believe this is true. I am for this and against this. And I could be wrong, you know, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. Like, that's my take. Of course, I'm like telling everybody to do what I do, which is like believe something and stand by it. And you're probably wrong. But the fastest way for you to find that you're wrong is to believe something wholeheartedly, to go all in on it and then realize, oh, I wasn't right about that. So you're right. You're absolutely right. And you've got to have both. And having some sort of civil discourse is a great way to go, you know what? I am right. And you're right too. And we're not saying the same thing, but we're seeing the same thing from different perspectives. And it is actually possible for you to be right in your way and for me to be right in my way. Or it may be that, you know, I'm wrong and you're right, or vice versa. But it's not always a mutually exclusive thing. Like parenting, right?
Sure,
it's
sure.
like, here's the thing I learned about being a dad. Well, I learned this about being a dad. And I remember kind of getting into this little, you know, jousting match with a fellow dad. And we were talking about girls and boys. I said, well, you know, I think girls are actually smarter than boys, especially early on. They seem to evolve emotionally faster and verbally more quickly than boys do. And he's like, well, I don't think that. I think, maybe, but boys have a better spatial intelligence. He has 2 boys, right? And he just kept like talking over me. And I was like, hey, I hear you. And what I'm saying as the father of a son and a daughter, that I might actually have an experience and a perspective here that you don't have. And he was like, all right, okay, fair. But I mean, he was like convicted, and I like was also convicted. And, it was that kind of rubbing together that, either erupts into a fist fight or, all right, cool. It was like that.
Well, being willing to apologize, or even, I'm reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great book. And he says, sometimes admit you're wrong, even when you're not wrong. Yeah,
right. I mean, it's winsome.
Yeah.
Because everybody's wrong about something. And if I go through life pretending I'm not wrong, you can't connect to me. You go, really? I don't believe that. Because that, even if it's true, like Superman doesn't have any friends, not like maybe a couple, right? Like to be superhuman is to isolate yourself from the human experience, superhuman, beyond human, right? And so to admit your faults is a way of letting people connect to you, relate to you, and trust you. But it's also just like a wonderful exercise to just honestly admit when you're wrong. I mean, yes, I think he's right. And I can usually tell when somebody's being falsely humble. And that's not interesting to me. When somebody's like, I've got, I'm not perfect too. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. You're even saying that perfectly. I don't trust you. When people honestly and earnestly just go, I was wrong. And you mentioned apology, and then you kind of like interrupted yourself. I don't even think you necessarily have to apologize for being wrong. Like you could just go, I was wrong. That's more powerful than sorry. Like sometimes, you need to probably apologize. It probably depends on whatever thing happened. But why be sorry for a thing that every human being does? It's like, right. I pooped today. Sorry. It's like, you just got rid of some waste. We all do it, bro. It's okay. Everybody poops, Don't have to talk about it in polite company, but you do it. You don't have to be sad about it. You could just admit that you poop, right? Like being wrong is like, hey, feces comes out of my bottom sometimes, and that's just what it is. I have an anus. That's what it's for, Anyway, it's like that. It's everybody poops. Everybody's wrong. Welcome to the human race. We're glad to have you.
And I think that, admitting mistakes is probably, like you said, one of the best ways to connect with people. If our goal here as a writer, as a podcaster, as a creator is to build an audience of fans, I just don't think you're going to build real relationships if you're just like the guy in front of the Lambo or the plane all the time. It just feels, like you said, it's hard to connect with somebody that's I think, perfect to that level. Right. Except my wife. I will say, though, that the only person in human history that's ever made a mistake was my wife. Everyone else, we're all humans. So.
I would agree. Your wife is flawless. No, yeah, it's like it's an art because and I think we get it wrong on social media when people are being authentic, like they're being transparent. What they're actually doing is they're oversharing in unhelpful ways. And if you want people to trust you, you have to both allow them to empathize with you and then give them a sense of hope. That there's something that they're struggling with, that on the other side of that is hope. There is, there is the dawn does come after, when it's darkest at night sort of thing. Like it does get brighter at some point. And so, cause nobody, like nobody wants Eeyore at their party, right? Where like, he's just sad all the time. It's like, right. Bro, really? Nothing is ever going right in your life? I mean, you're a donkey. Like, that's cool. Like, you could pull a lot of weight, I bet. You're stronger than you look. Like, there's got to be something going on there. And so it's empathy and some sense of authority or hope. Like, that's what a story does. A story says, hey, I'm a human. I know what it's like to be human. And this isn't where your story ends. We live our lives as narratives. And so if I tell you a story about success and, and the story is A, B, C, A, I was broke, B, then this thing happened, and C, I lived happily ever after. And you're like at A or B, right? You're not at C. You need C to feel a sense of significance in the midst of whatever struggle you're having, right? That is the power of a story. And I think that if you are going to endeavor to put things on the internet, you're going to publish things, you're going to write a post or a caption or something on your Instagram, like, and you want people to pay attention to you, understand that people are looking for hope. Nobody is going, I've got enough hope. We always want more hope. Right? I'm getting ready to buy a house right now. And, and it's hard to buy a house right now. And as a self-employed person, it's hard to know if you have checked enough boxes so that, the bank will lend you enough money. And I just got an email from the lender saying, oh yeah, all these assets that you have over here, that means you're good for the money. We're good now. And I'm like, well, good. Cause I was about ready to give you my kidney because of all the things that you need me to provide, because it doesn't matter that I employ 4 people, and provide for multiple households, including my own, because I don't have a W-2 job. I am somehow risky for a bank. Anyway, that is a soapbox. But that email gave me hope. And I was like, I was feeling nervous. I was scared. I didn't know that for sure we were going to get this house. It could fall through. And we're always looking for hope. You want people to listen to you. You want them to pay attention to you. Give them hope that they can trust, which means you've been where they've been and you've gone somewhere that they haven't gone. And tell the truth. Don't lie about it. Don't make it false hope. Tell a story about something that you have actually overcome. Don't pretend to be somewhere you're not. If we find out the Lamborghini is rented, that's not cool, right? But that's why that stuff works, Mark. That's why, somebody can stand and walk through a house that they Airbnb'd for the weekend and go, this is my mansion. People do this.
Yes.
And lots of people pay attention. It does work because there's hope there. But I would say the hope that doesn't disappoint, the thing that feels good to me and has some longevity to it, is to be honest about some of my misfortunes and trials and tribulations and struggles, and then to go, hey, and this is how I overcame one of those things. It is possible to get out of whatever mess you think you're in. Everybody wants hope. It's the best medicine.
This message really, really hits true with me, Jeff. Last month in my Mastermind program, we really focused in on storytelling and that formula of normal, conflict, new normal that brings the hope, that expresses the empathy that you can have with your reader or your listener. I've been through it, and that this is how I came out the other side. It's really inspiring, and it's completely changed the way, by the way, that I operate on social media, and by just this small copyright that I do on social media posts completely evolves the way I've started to write. I do want to shift topics real quick though, because I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about an additional way to monetize as a writer. I got to ask. I got the professional on the line. I got to ask him. One of the members in my mastermind, his name's Brad Shreve. I'll put a link to his podcast below. Great guy. He's trying to find some different ways to monetize his show. And again, he's a big writer. So one of the ways he's been thinking about doing this is with a book club. What are your thoughts on a book club as a good way to monetize a show? Have you seen it work? Any recommendations you might give to starting a book club?
Yeah, go for it if it's what you actually want to do. I think one of the problems with online marketing right now is we build platforms to sell stuff that we think people want, and we never stop to go, do I want to do this? Is this why I got into this in the first place? It is actually possible to make money off of a lot of different things. Maybe not off of anything that you want to create. I don't like the word monetize. I never understood it. I never monetized. I sold stuff. I created products and services that other people wanted, that I enjoyed creating, and I sold them for money. The idea that you can monetize a show, I get it, I understand, but it sort of implies that there's like a button, behind your computer or next to your microphone, or literally I was like, where's the slider on my WordPress dashboard that monetizes the blog? And I actually thought that was through advertising, and it didn't work that well for me. And so I think the best way to monetize is to try lots of different things, see how much you enjoy doing that. Because you may go, you may go, hey, I want to write poetry and I need millions of people to pay me millions of dollars to write poetry. And that may not work out for you. It does work out for some people. So we can't say it's impossible, but that may not work out for you for lots of reasons. And if you start out too stubborn too quickly, you'll miss other opportunities. So try lots of different things, see what lands for you and what lands for other people. Now you've got a good relationship, right? When you're doing something that you love and other people want it and are willing to pay for it, I mean, that's a good thing. But it is possible for you to do something you hate and people want it. And now you've got the golden handcuff situation. So just because people are willing to pay for it doesn't mean you should sell it to them. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because you think this is how you ought to be making money may not be how you actually end up making money. And there may be something that people want from you that you didn't know that you would love creating. Like I got into ghostwriting going, I want me. I want my voice. I want my words in the world. I love ghostwriting. It's like acting for me. It's like writing a novel. I get to be somebody else for a little while. It can be so much fun if it's the right client. And I make more money and write more books and get to express myself in so many different ways, writing in other people's voices. And it makes me a better writer, makes me a better human. So, don't be so stubborn. Jeff Bezos said when he started Amazon and they started succeeding, he said, we're stubborn on vision, we're flexible on details. Have a clear vision of where you want to go, what you want to do. Be uncompromising in that, because the world will throw lots of distractions your way. The internet will especially throw lots of distractions your way. Your peers will throw distractions your way. You should be doing this. Oh, I should be doing that. You get around a bunch of internet entrepreneurs and they're like, I'm doing a mastermind. I should do a mastermind. Do you have any business running a mastermind? Do you know how to coach people? Do you know how to lead groups of people? Are you good at speaking? Are you good at, facilitating hot seat exercises or whatever you do? It may not be your jam. You can actually make a living doing almost anything you love doing these days, provided that you find a way to connect it to real felt needs of other people. Book club, sure. And try 3 other things and don't marry any of them until you've done each of them for 6 months and you go, yeah, I like this. And don't give up on the thing that you absolutely long to do because you believe that it's impossible. I don't think so. We just drop the mic on that. That is so wise. I tried so many different business ideas until I finally landed on something that I enjoy. And I got to say, ladies and gentlemen, before we let him go here, we're going to get to the rapid fire. So hang tight, rapid fire coming soon. Get ready, drink your Monster Energy drink, whatever you got to do. But before you do that, you need a book and you need to go to freshcomplaint.com. That's freshcomplaint.com, where Jeff is going to help put your words out in the ether in perpetuity. Go to freshcomplaint.com. I'll put a link below. That woke up the doggy behind you too. He's excited. He's ready. All right. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So Jeff, Mr. Jeff Goins, let's get into some rapid fire questions. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Jeff, mountains or beaches? Where are you going to be?
Mountains.
Makes sense. You're in Tennessee, so I'm glad you chose mountains. If you could live anywhere on earth, where would you live?
I would live lots of places, but the next place I would live would probably be northern Spain.
What's the scariest movie you've ever seen?
Snow White. That witch was super scary when I was a kid. That was probably the scariest thing I've ever seen.
I like that. That's a good answer. You did something horrible, Jeff. I don't know what it is, but it's really bad. You're on death row. What are you getting for your final meal?
I would get a steak. I would get a really good bottle of wine, a Napa Cab, and I'd get like a side pasta dish flown in from Italy, like a gnocchi bolognese, probably.
Oof. Bolognese sauce or bolognese sauce. I maybe not pronounce that right, but that's awesome.
Yeah. And then maybe a cheesecake for dessert.
Right on. Carrot cake underrated, by the way. I'm just going to put it out there.
I love carrot cake.
Okay. So you're on a trip. You're on this airplane. You could sit next to anybody in history on your airplane. Who are you going to sit next to?
I would sit next to Ernest Hemingway, probably. We would fly first class and we'd drink the whole way.
Nice. Nice. Sounds good. Are you going to be on the aisle or the window seat?
I'm always on the aisle because I just don't want to be. I don't want to have to be locked in. I have to go to the bathroom. I want the freedom to not have to ask permission to get up.
Good call. Good call. Jeff, thanks so much for joining the show today and spreading your wisdom, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark. It's my pleasure.
Well, thanks for hanging out with Jeff and I for a few minutes. What'd you think about this conversation? We got a little bit deep, which I thought was a little bit of fun. I kind of try to find this balance between too much technical jargon and then not enough storytelling. Jeff does a great job with the storytelling. Hope you enjoyed. By the way, if you have not yet, leave a subscribe, leave a 5-star review. It really helps me know that I'm on the right track, and it helps me keep the show rolling. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, and I will catch you here next time on the After Hours Entrepreneur. Now, before I let you go take action. You know what to do. Go take the action. I'll see you next time. Peace.